Welcome back to the Global Ledger. I'm Justin. By the time you're listening to this episode, policymakers around the world will have lived through multiple liquidity crises, at least one global financial crisis, several market structure failures, and repeated episodes of emergency intervention. And yet, many of the same mistakes continue to be made. Not because policymakers are unintelligent, and not because they lack the data, and also not because they lack experience, but because they often misdiagnose the system they are trying to manage. That's what today's episode is about. What policymakers get wrong again and again, and why those errors persist. Let's get into it. One of the most common errors is treating markets as a reflection of the economy. In reality, markets are funding systems. The economy is a production system. They are linked, but not identical. Policymakers often respond to market stress by asking, what does this mean for growth? But the correct question is, what is broken in funding? When the distinction is missed, responses lag or target the wrong channel. Another recurring mistake is believing that adjusting policy rates is sufficient to control financial conditions. Rates matter, but they are not the system. Funding depends on balance sheet capacity, collateral quality, dealer intermediation, risk constraints, and regulatory frictions. This is why we repeatedly see episodes where rates fall or liquidity tightens, and markets seize anyway. The price of money does not guarantee its availability. Policymakers often treat liquidity as a quantity, something that can be injected, something that accumulates. But liquidity is relational. It depends on who holds assets, who can finance them, and who can intermediate between the two. This is why large-scale interventions sometimes fail to calm markets immediately. Liquidity cannot be forced into existence where balance sheets are constrained. Another persistent explanation for crisis is loss of confidence. Confidence matters, but it is rarely the cause. Most modern crises begin with funding stress, collateral revaluation, and margin pressure. Confidence erodes after liquidity fails, not before. Treating crisis as psychological events does lead to rhetorical responses, I think, instead of structural ones. Policy frameworks often assume that private sectors will transmit liquidity or arbitrage dislocations or stabilize markets. But these assumptions break down precisely when they are needed most. During stress, balance sheets shrink, risk tolerance collapses, regulatory constraints bind. Ignoring this reality leads to repeated surprises, I think, when markets fail to self-correct. Many policy frameworks remain domestically focused, but the financial system is globally, it's global by construction. Funding stress travels through FX markets, offshore dollar markets, cross-border banking networks, so domestic tools applied to global problems often arrive late or even sometimes incomplete. This is why international coordination reappears in every major crisis, even when it was previously dismissed, say as unnecessary. These errors, I think, persist because models simplify, and I think mandates narrow the focus a little bit, and political constraints limit, I think, acknowledgement of system fragility. It is easier to manage narratives than it is the plumbing, I think. But the cost of repeated misdiagnosis is structural fragility, not just volatility. So here's what I think a better frame looks like. A more effective policy framework would be distinguishing funding from demand. Treat markets as infrastructure, not sentiment. Focus on balance sheet capacity. Monitor collateral dynamics continuously. And accept that some instability is structural. This doesn't eliminate crises, of course, but it shortens them and reduces their severity. So we've examined why policymakers repeatedly misread crisis. The next question turns toward the investor, because many of the same misunderstandings appear there as well. So in episode 99, we'll explore what investors misunderstand about risk. It's going to be a good one. And why the biggest risks, I think, are often invisible until they have to be seen. And that's next. So I want to thank you for listening to episode 98 of The Global Ledger. I'm Justin, and thanks for being here.